And welcome back, everyone. And again, we will be taking you live to AIPAC in Washington when Donald Trump takes the stage, which we expect to be soon. So while you went back to work this Monday, you're not a member of the U.S. Senate. The senators, they're beginning a 2-week spring break, you see, which means that the fight over President Obama's nominee to the U.S. Supreme Court, Merrick Garland, is moving from Capitol Hill to the state level, and public opinion on the nomination could be a major factor in the outcome, or at least whether the nomination is even considered by the Senate, or if senators even agree to meet with a moderate Garland. And while public opinion may be more critical on a state-by-state basis, our first national poll from Gallup shows a majority of Americans, 52%, want Judge Garland confirmed, with only 29% opposed. Now, as we said, state-by-state numbers may be more telling because of the pressure they may put on individual senators like Republican Mark Kirk of Illinois, who's in a toss-up race, one of the ones we talked about last segment, to try and keep his seat this November, which may explain why Kirk broke with many in the GOP, calling not only for hearings, but a full up or down vote on Garland's nomination. And our presidential candidate, John Kasich, he didn't go that far, but he did say he would consider nominating Garland for the court if he were elected president. Now, he later walked that back, but still said senators should at least meet with Garland. But the top Republican in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, there's no gray area with him, not budging in the slightest. This weekend, he again ruled out a vote or even hearings on the subject when it comes to Mr. Garland. And he also pushed back against some Senate Republicans who hinted on a Garland vote after the election. Again, this is after November, when we'd know whoever was president. Assuming Hillary Clinton wins the White House, McConnell even rejected that move. McConnell was also in one of the more interesting Garland-related debates on Fox News this weekend, when host Chris Wallace pressed McConnell about comments that McConnell made related to Supreme Court nominations during the Bush administration.
In a democracy, an up or down vote should be given to a president's judicial nominees. It's complicated, it's simple, it's fair. It worked for 229 years, and it has served us well.
Senator, if an up or down vote for a judicial nominee is simple, fair, and a principle that has served us for 229 years, I guess now it's over 230 years, if that's true then, is it still true?
Yeah, you're talking about apples and oranges. That comment was not in connection with the Supreme Court vacancy. What we're talking about here's the factual situation.
But it's still a judicial nominee,
the Supreme Court, no, they're not the same. The Supreme Court is very different from the other courts.
Uh-huh. All right. Richard, you're an attorney yourself. Explain why the public doesn't have a right to have 9 justices and at least give the guy the courtesy of hearings and a vote. You don't like him, don't vote for him. But at least have the courtesy of this, for somebody to say, yeah, I know the Founding Fathers put it in, I know what Article 5 says, but you know what, it doesn't apply here. It doesn't sound right, and certainly if you believe the polls, it doesn't smell right.
The people absolutely have a right. They actually have a constitutional right to have a Supreme Court nominee that is nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. There is an absolute right to that, and the process should play out. I have no excuse of why the process wouldn't play out, at least legally. There is a political explanation for it, which I'm not going to touch on, but certainly I agree. I'm one of those majority of Americans say, hey, give them an up or down. Whether it's down, keep the process going.
Well, Andrew, you can touch on the politics. I don't think it doesn't. I get it. I get it that if you're McConnell, this plays well. But explain how it makes any sense to say, okay, it's November now. Let's say Hillary wins, and she says Merrick Garland should be on the bench. Let's not wait another 3 months before we even get the process started till after the inauguration or whatever. Let's go already. Start the hearings. You know, vote on the guy one way or the other.
The fear from a lot of the Republicans who are now saying, hey, let's consider something in the lame duck after the presidential election is that Hillary Clinton, assuming that she wins, isn't going to nominate Merrick Garland. She's going to nominate somebody far more liberal than Merrick Garland is. And so the Garland nomination is sort of the best you can get right now. Assuming that no Republican wins the White House. It sort of makes naked the argument that we're doing this for constitutional reasons. We're waiting for Americans to have their say, because now you're starting to hear, well, even if they have their say and we don't like their answer, then maybe we'll reconsider on this. It's becoming patently obvious that the only answer that's going to satisfy Senate Republicans is, well, we're just holding out until a Republican wins the White House so we can get another conservative on the Supreme Court. Everything else is just theater.
you know, Dom, for me, this one, I know, and I'll get from Jeannie, if historically this matters to people when they vote, you know, how the Supreme Court, the nominee, but also the process. But to me, this one's stuff that the regular person can understand. This is not some bleeding heart justice here. If you look at his bona fides and his record, even, you know, with some Republican nominations in the past, and he was spoken very well of by Senator Grassley, who heads the Senate Judiciary Committee. So nobody claims this guy's not competent for the job. Now, maybe there's some skeleton that hasn't come out, but that always comes out in the hearings. This doesn't sound right again. Don't you think this could bite some of these guys?
Definitely. Doesn't pass the smell test. It's going to energize the Democratic base for Hillary Clinton. It gives Democrats that perhaps were looking for a reason to stay home or wasn't interested in the election to say, hey, wait a minute, this is not fair, this is not right, this is not the American way. Hey, aren't those the guys that are always talking about the Constitution, but yet it doesn't apply when you don't want it to apply? All of this doesn't pass the smell test. It's a bad move. You just heard the Republican say that if it was up to him, give him an up or down vote. That is the way that most American voters will see this. Whether you like the guy or not, up or down vote. If you don't like him, don't support him for the Supreme Court.
And again, this is more of a moderate pick. The president, it's interesting where he went on this one. He could have gone in a bunch of different directions. He picked what most people considered, at least from the regular list of potential ones, the most moderate one of the bunch. But will voters care, Jeannie?
You know, and to your point, Orrin Hatch is a very close friend of Garland.
Yep.
So is Justice John Roberts. They worked together, and just weeks before this nomination was made, Roberts made a speech saying he should get, not he, but you should always have the judge get the confirmation vote, up or down. But, you know, are people going to go into the polls and vote on this? Absolutely not. Go out and take a poll and see how many people even know who Merrick Garland is. People vote on the economy, they vote on jobs, they do not ever vote on process. And so this is an internal Washington, D.C. fight. I think it's relevant. I think people should consider it. I mean, I think Andrew just made the case that, you know, if Hillary Clinton is nominated, she could get 1, 2, 3 picks to the Supreme Court at this point. There's a lot of elderly justices sitting there. But no, voters aren't going to take this into account in the slightest when they go to the ballot.
Unless it can be made into issues too, and some of the stuff that's before a 4-4 court at the moment, and how this could be a swing one way or the other.
But here's why it is an issue. It's going to be seen by the base as a slap to Barack Obama. That's why it's going to turn things around.
In the split screen right now, you can see the live shot, this at the Verizon Center in Washington, and that's where they got both the pro hockey and pro basketball for the DC teams. That's how big an arena, sold out here. We're expecting to hear from Donald Trump right on the other side of the break here. AIPAC will be very curious what he's going to say to a very skeptical audience right now in a major Jewish and Israeli lobbying group. Stay with us.